We here at Tech News Today make no secret of the fact that we are not sports fans, not really, but we still regularly read The Ringer, which is mostly sports and also a lot of really unique tech reporting by Molly McHugh, Victor Luckerson, and our next guest, Alyssa Bereznak. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So one of your headlines caught my eye this week. The Facebook of the dead. It's a deep dive of sorts into the world of legacy.com, the internet's obituary warehouse. First, what made you want to sit down with the CEO of legacy.com?
Well, there's always been a stat sort of floating around on the internet, and just a general sort of nagging problem for Facebook, which is that they have a lot of dead people on it. You know, they really did have to create user features that addressed this issue, because it was like before someone would die and then all of a sudden it became this weird middle ground of an obituary page, but like the families, like the deceased person's family couldn't access it or edit it. And so I was just sort of wondering if there was an alternative to that, you know, like what happens when I die, and like, are my social media accounts all that's left of me? And that's what sort of led me to look into Legacy. And it just so happened that they're actually now developing this sort of like incubator, like faux startup over in Calabasas, California, and trying to foster this like high-tech data science focused team to actually sort of create a social network for obituaries, which is incredibly dark.
It is. I mean, it makes you think about, like, you know, looking at all the cemeteries and thinking, gosh, like when we're going to run out of room. It's sort of the same thing about Facebook. Like at one point you feel like, wow, there are more, you know, at one point you get to the point in your life where like you have more friends that are alive than not alive. But legacy.com it's not new. It's not a startup. It's been around for a while. Tell us when they got started. And I guess you've already told us a little bit about how they're changing. Is this their first big change?
No, I mean, they've existed since 1998. So clearly they started as just basically a way to move obituaries from newspapers online. And that was sort of like the early internet for everything, right? Like all of a sudden you can read the New York Times online. And then they started partnering with newspapers everywhere and funeral homes. And eventually it just became clear that they could get direct user contributions, and also sort of make use of the fact that the internet is public, and loved ones who have known the deceased through their whole, like at different parts of their lives, could contribute memories. And, you know, so they opened in comment sections, and then the way they started making money was through like small, like buy flowers for the family buttons, and create a memory book. But then, of course, along with the good contributions to a person's obituary came like intense spam. So they've sort of been working on adapting to the internet, just like all the other social networks that are constantly running into problems every day, but it's much less in the spotlight, and it's much more regulated, and it's not like a very public feed where journalists are trawling all day long. You know, it's more something that gets traffic from Google hits when you search a person's name in obituary. But at the same time, it's a really important part of existing today, right? Because your online life is just as important as your tangible interpersonal relationships in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, in many ways, people spend as much time as much kind of important time of their waking hours online as they do in their real lives. And so, yeah, there needs to be representation in both areas for that when they're no longer here. So obviously there are visitors to the site that are there specifically to pay respects to someone very specifically, you know, someone they know, or someone that, you know, that they are related to, whatever the case may be. But are there casual users of the site? And if so, how the heck does that work? That seems even darker, I suppose.
Yes, actually, there are casual users of the site. And as you might imagine, they're more historians. They're more people whose friends and family members are dying more often, maybe, and so they're older. When I spoke to Steve Parrott, the CEO, he said that they actually have a lot of different user profiles that they sort of cobble together from browser cookies to sort of define different visitors. And so in some cases, it's Rosemary, the grandmother who likes to browse and who they know to sort of offer small, like LinkedIn-esque features, like if you read this obituary, you might be interested in this obituary, which is incredibly dark, right? But at the same time, it's helping a user who actually might be interested in clicking on to that next piece of content. And then they have user profiles for
people who are Googling and they know, okay, this is a one and done thing. They're going to pay their respects to the deceased, and they don't want any sort of intense or like smart suggestions about what else to do on the site. Like, they know that it's not a pleasant thing to be visiting the site. So they have to be really careful about that, right? Because you don't want to offend someone who's mourning. They're in a really emotional state in the first place.
Right.
And speaking to Steve, it really did sound like they had moments where they did offend people.
Well, every social network wants to get as many people and keep them there as long as possible. So,
Right.
yeah, I guess they really are in search of those people, the people that go to funerals just to go to funerals, which I guess seems to be those same kinds of people that go to legacy.com.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of area to be in, because designing a social network around death kind of requires a level of restraint, a level of responsibility. I mean, compared to other social networks that are like memes and, and all of your favorite photos from your vacation. Like, I don't know. It's just it's a strange way to think about it, I suppose.
But you say they get pretty creative. I mean, when Prince died, they live streamed his funeral. What are some of the other things they're doing like that?
Yeah. So when Celine Dion's husband died, they made like a really big effort to be sort of like the sponsored program to create like a very fancy memory book, like leather bound. There were 8 editions of it. And they have sort of like a mourning columnist written by a widow who's sort of like the Dear Abby of death. And now they're sort of looking forward to changing up the obituary pages so they're not just text, but they are multimedia, and this is something that's very much in the future for them. They haven't necessarily accomplished that, but they're working with some prototypes to really like jazz things up and make it so that all of the digital artifacts that people collect of them over the years, like the photos that they had on Facebook that represented a really special time in their life, that they could put that on there as a timeline or something. And of course, it's all approved by the family. It's not completely crowdsourced in an uncontrolled way, but at the same time, they're looking to make the site more engaging, just as you were saying, like they want to keep people interested and on the pages.
You mentioned spam, but sadly, it appears that even after you're dead, you can't get rid of some trolls. You have a story about an acrostic poem that actually, on someone's obituary, that actually spelled out the word whore, and it wasn't caught. It was almost not caught, but then it was caught. So I guess they have some technology in place to catch these sort of things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a constantly updated algorithm, and they had this way before the Innovation Center. They've had this since like the early 90s, and they've been updating it more and more as the trolls get smarter and smarter and worse and worse. And now they actually have like a staff of about 100 contractors who work through like a 3-tiered system. Like a comment has to be seen by 3 people. And that's how that really, at first, seemingly loving poem, but then ultimately horrible poem sort of got through, but was finally caught by a person. And I spoke to some of these people, and it's intense for them. I mean, they really see a lot of mean, spiteful stuff, like written by mistresses and people who want revenge on the dead. It's fascinating.